The Advocate for Success. Season 1, Episode 5. The Independent Living Philosophy. Produced by Elton Thomas. Mission Advocate is a store on Etsy where you can buy apparel to express your advocacy. Shirts are designed by the producer of the Advocate for Success podcast, Elton Thomas.
Empowerment can be expressed through your apparel. Visit the Mission Advocate store on Etsy at etsy.com/shop/missionadvocate.
Carlie and Frank have been living together for 5 years. At first, things were great. They would spend every waking second together, and would miss each other terribly when they were apart. A year ago, Carlie accepted a job as government compliance officer for a large corporation. While it was a dream move for Carlie, Frank did not like that she was working so much. At first, Frank would ask about her day, and then the conversation would steer to who she talks to, and who she sits next to on her breaks. Carlie and Frank would have constant arguments over her work schedule, and Frank's suspicions of her seeing other men. Carlie loved Frank so much and did not want to lose him. She could not handle the pressures of her work, along with the stresses of her home life, so she decided to look for a different career. She found a job opening for a public policy specialist at a local independent living center. In this new role, Carlie will advocate for a better life for people with disabilities.
Independent living, IL, is a philosophy and a movement that advocates for people with disabilities to stay out of institutions. Its principles stress that a person with a disability has the right to choose their own services and providers, that the system must support this choice, and that the system should focus on removing physical barriers rather than emphasizing an individual's limitations. Centers for Independent Living are a nationwide network of not-for-profit, consumer-controlled organizations that provide individual and systems advocacy, information and referral, peer support and independent living skills training to help people with disabilities take control of their own lives and lead the life they want. They are unique, disability-led organizations that were developed in the 1960s and 1970s during the independent living movement to embody the philosophy of independent living. The National Council of Independent Living, NCIL, was founded to promote and support the independent living movement and a system of centers that are person-centered and person-directed. NCIL is a not-for-profit, membership organization that consists of centers for independent living, people with disabilities, self-advocates, their families and friends, and other community-based organizations that share the independent living philosophy.
After her first day of orientation and training, Carlie has a profound perspective on what people with disabilities go through in their daily life, and life in general. The struggles that people with disabilities face are often blamed on their physical limitations, related to their disability. However, the root cause of the struggle is due to the barriers put in place by people who do not have disabilities. Carlie gets home close to 6 p.m. Frank meets her at the front door, and brings her to the dining room table, where he has a meal prepared to celebrate her first day in her new job. Carlie sits at the table. The lights are dimmed, and a candle lit sitting in the center of the table. Frank brings out 2 plates of food. He sets one down in front of Carlie and the other at his spot as he sits across from her. Carlie looks at her meal: porterhouse steak, baked potato with butter and sour cream, and corn on the cob. Frank then pours her a glass of red wine, Merlot. Carlie then thinks to herself, wow. Frank prepared me his favorite meal and we are having his favorite wine. Though Carlie would have loved to enjoy a grilled mackerel fillet, a Caesar salad, and a glass of Moscato, she decides to focus on the fact that Frank did put forth effort for her, and that is good enough. Carlie takes the first bite of steak, and compliments Frank on the flavor. Then she thanks him for preparing the meal. Frank then clears his throat and asks Carlie how her first day was. Carlie lights up and talks about how wonderful her coworkers are, and how she feels she found her calling. Carlie then explains the independent living philosophy to Frank. It's a philosophy that people with disabilities deserve to live an independent life, just like anyone else, that independence does not only belong to people who do not have disabilities. Frank then asks Carlie if she made any male friends. Carlie sighs as she responds, "Yes, there are men where I work, and they all seem nice." Frank asks Carlie how much time she spends talking to the men. Carlie then asks Frank if they can please change the subject. Frank says, "Sure." Frank then points out, "It seems like you are saying institutions are a bad thing." Carlie says, "Yes, for people with disabilities who want to live an independent life, it is." Frank then says, "I mean, I do not get it, at an institution you are taken care of, meals cooked, staff taking care of you, that seems like a dream come true to me." Carlie responds, "At an institution, you do not get to choose your meals, you do not get to choose who takes care of you, and you even have visiting hours. If anyone visits you, it gets recorded in a book, and if you want to leave you have to sign out." Frank responds, "I mean, that sounds like a small price to pay to be taken care of." Frank continues, "My lobbying firm ensures that state institutions, like private or public schools, prisons, and facilities get the funding they need to help out the community. These institutions provide a great service to the community, and we should all be thankful for them." Carlie sighs, "I had a long day, I am going to call it a night." Frank asks Carlie if she is going to finish the dinner he worked so hard to prepare. She says, "I'm just not hungry." Frank stands up and walks over to Carlie, grabbing her by the arm, "You just don't appreciate anything I do for you." Carlie tries to get away as Frank pulls her towards him. Carlie tells Frank that she will be sleeping in the guest room, and in Frank's explanation of upcoming events, his right fist accidentally made contact with Carlie's left cheekbone. Carlie grabs clothes from her room, goes to the guest room, and closes and locks the door.
People with disabilities are vulnerable to being placed into environments which have been identified as sites of incarceration. Many individuals with disabilities spend their entire lives living in large institutions that restrict their rights, isolate them from communities, restrict choice and expression freedoms, and perpetuate an atmosphere in which they feel they cannot take part in society as equal members. They also lack access to basic services that most of us take for granted, such as access to nutritious food, clean water, and accessible housing. Key to moving away from institutionalization is moving toward community-based housing with person-centered support and services that assist individuals to connect to family and the wider community. Unfortunately, research indicates that transition from institutions to community-based housing can often be challenging. Many individuals with disabilities have spent their entire lives inside an institution and may not feel ready to leave familiar surroundings behind. Furthermore, due to differences between Olmstead decision and how Congress distributes Medicaid funds for distribution, many who would like to live independently but lack viable financial options cannot.
Carlie has been in her role as a public policy specialist for a few months now. She has fallen in love with the work and the people in the community she advocates for. She is also still sleeping in her guest room and feels like a prisoner in her own home. Carlie has a meeting today with a couple, Alex and Kim, who are both paraplegic, and advocate for funding of the Medicaid program called Consumer Directed Services, CDS. Carlie, Alex, and Kim meet at a local coffee shop that is well known for being accessible for people who use wheelchairs. Carlie asks them to share about themselves, and Alex starts, "We are a happy couple and do things like anyone else, like go on dates, enjoy a romantic comedy at home, and attend social events." Alex smiles and continues, "And the main reason why Kim likes me so much is because I cannot kick her when I'm angry." Kim then quickly replies, "He does like to smack me with his humorous from time to time." Carlie then does something she hasn't done for months, she laughs. And it wasn't just an ordinary laugh, it was laughter that went on for almost a minute. No matter how hard she tried, Carlie could not stop. It was one of those laughs where tears poured down her face. Perhaps, these laughs were making up for the last several months of sadness in her home life. Kim looks at Carlie and says, "Wow, Carlie, I didn't know we were that funny." Carlie wipes her eyes, and they begin discussing the plan to advocate for consumer-directed services.
Consumer-directed services are service options that give people with disabilities significant control over the who, what, and when of needed home and community-based care. These options are a result of decades-old advocacy movements among working-age adults with disabilities in the US and Western Europe seeking greater self-determination, choice, flexibility, and less professional and state control. The core principles behind this movement include recognizing and respecting individuals' autonomy and dignity by giving them choices and authority over their own lives, including decisions about what care they receive. The consumer movement also reflects fundamental humanistic values that are the basis for many helping professions such as medicine, nursing, and social work that seek to help people with disabilities achieve their maximum independence, well-being, and quality of life. Since the 1990s, the concept of consumer-directed services has grown and evolved. Its importance has become apparent through implementing Medicaid-funded consumer-directed personal assistance (CDPA) programs that allow enrolled consumers to hire their own care providers, often family members, to provide care in their homes and communities. The program's benefits extend beyond cost savings for the individual, as it has been shown to improve quality of life and outcomes and provide increased flexibility and satisfaction with their home and community-based care. Some states have built-in levels of support to assist participants with their employer responsibilities, such as hiring employees and conducting background checks.
Carlie meets with a friend for dinner that she made at a fundraiser a few weeks ago. His name is Dan, he is very nice, and a person who is paraplegic. Carlie was interested in Dan's opinion of people first language. Dan explains, it's all about recognizing that people are not defined by their disabilities. He goes on, instead of saying, a paralyzed person, you would say, a person who is paralyzed. This can help society understand that people with disabilities are people first, who just happen to have a disability. Then Dan looks at Carlie, so, tell me about the situation you are in. Carlie responds, I'm not sure what you mean. Dan continues, I've seen that posture and look many times, it's the, I'm in a bad situation posture and look. Carlie then summarizes her situation with Frank. Dan then points out that it seems like Carlie is living in an institutional environment, run by Frank. Then they change the subject to something they both love to talk about, public policy. In the back of her mind, Carlie finds the irony that, while she is advocating for people with disabilities to be independent and stay out of institutions, her independence has been restricted in many similar ways, by Frank. She knows that her situation is not sustainable, and needs to find a way to get back her independence.
On June 22, 1999, the Supreme Court's Olmstead decision established that states must provide individuals with disabilities community-based support and services rather than segregate them into institutions. Although many individuals with disabilities now live independently within communities as a result of Olmstead and subsequent enforcement mandates, some states still fail to implement the law and care for individuals like Olmstead appropriately. Sometimes, this can be due to funding restrictions and the necessity of creating new systems. State Medicaid programs are often unwilling to allocate limited funds toward community services for people with disabilities. The U.S. Department of Justice has taken steps to help remedy these problems and encourage communities to expand services for people living with disabilities.
Carlie has been hanging out with Dan for a few weeks, as friends, but Frank thinks it's more than that. She gets home around 8:30, and Frank tells Carlie he got her a gift. Frank brings her to an end table in the living room, where there is a charging station set up for her phone. Darling, I got this for you so that you can charge your phone out here, that way, you won't be bothered by texts and notifications in the middle of the night. Carlie responds, I can't believe you think that I will fall for that. You just want to spy on me. Frank is distraught, I can't believe you are seeing a cripple. Carlie says, his name is Dan, and he has become a good friend. Frank gets angry, you should not be seeing other men, you are my girlfriend. Carlie then quickly responds, I am a person, who is not your girlfriend. Carlie then sends a text to her friend, Trish, it's time. Trish has an extra room set for Carlie in case things get out of hand with Frank. Carlie then gets a text back from Trish, I'm on my way. Trish doesn't even knock, walks right into Frank's house, and helps Carlie gather her things. Carlie gets in her car and Trish gets into hers, and Trish tells Carlie to pull out first, she just wants to make sure that Frank does not follow them. As Carlie sets up the room in her new home, with her new roommate, she ponders on the independent living philosophy. The truth is that we all want to achieve the highest level of independence possible, and moving forward, she is going to give it her all to ensure that people with disabilities achieve independence.